I'm setting up an edge-to-edge project in repeat patterns. I have my pattern on the preview window, cotton candy. I have used the measure icon up here. I have measured the width of this quilt from the upper left to the upper right. Also, you can see I have drawn in a boundary. I have the quilt width of 63.74. I'm going to click cancel. And now I'm going to set up this cotton candy pattern in repeat patterns. I also have already adjusted the height of this pattern to 4 inches because that's what I want it to be. I'm going down and I'm going to click on this horizontal vertical. I want 0.5 vertical, negative 0.5 vertical spacing. I put that in first. I click OK. I hover my mouse over the total width and I right click. I get a click to transfer box. I'll transfer the width in that box. In the total height, I will put the length of the quilt. This quilt is 76 inches, so I will enter 76 in this box. 76 inches. And when I click OK, Creative Studio is going to put all these patterns on the screen. Now, if you look carefully down here at the bottom, you'll see that Creative Studio is doing the calculations. Creative Studio has finished calculating all the rows and all the repeats of this quilt. And I want to look carefully at the right edge of this quilt because I do not want it to quilt off the edge. I'm going to adjust this top row very slightly so this tip doesn't go off the edge of the quilt. That looks good right there. I can quilt 1, 2, 3, 4 rows without any problem. I'm going to do this a little different because I like to quilt from the left to the right and then from the right back to the left. I have selected all the repeats in row 2. I'm going to right click, go down and combine group. When I click on any repeat in row 1, it only selects one repeat. When I click on any repeat now in row 2, it will select the entire row. With the row selected, I'm going to right click again. I'm going to reverse the start and end because now this is one pattern, one entity, and the start point of this row was here, the end point was here. I reversed them. Now the start point is at the right, the end point of that row is at the left. This will quilt left to right on row 1, and then it will go down and it will quilt right to left on row 2. I'm going to do the same thing on row 4. Again on row 4, I'm going to combine the group. They're all selected. I'll combine them. Then I will right click them again and I will reverse the start and end. I have selected all the rows from row 5 to the bottom, and the reason I did this, I'm going to toggle all of these rows as sewn. I'm going to toggle them back as unsewn, but I'm doing this to show you something. All of the rows from row 5 to the bottom now are toggle sewn. I'm going to press the F8 key. Creative Studio has finished doing all the sewing order, and what I really want you to see is row 1 starts with 0, goes through 13, then it goes down to row 2 and 14 is over here, then 15 is in row 3 through 28 and 29 is in row 4. So that's how it will quilt. Left to right in row 1, right to left in row 2, left to right in row 3, right to left in row 4. I've toggled everything back to unsewn down in row 5 to the bottom because I know I can quilt 4 rows, and at the end of the 4th row I'm just simply going to stop. And I'm going to roll the quilt, and I'm going to do a relocate, and I'm going to quilt the next 4 rows. I shut the machine down yesterday after quilting these first 4 rows. I don't need this boundary, so I'm simply going to get rid of the boundary, and I'll draw a new one. I like to make a new boundary in repeat patterns sometimes. That shows me the edge of the quilt. So I'm going to draw a boundary. And well, first I'm going to do a relocate before I draw the boundary. I'm going to relocate, and I'm simply going to right click, and it doesn't really matter where I right click. I'm going to right click over here and use relocate. Now I can use any number. I can use Shift Alt to 1 point, Shift Alt to 2 points, or relocate project origin. I really have started using Shift Alt to 1 point recently, and that's what I use all the time. I'm going to do that. Click on Shift Alt to 1 point. I am also going to turn on the end snap and let this snap to the. This is the start point of the row that I finished quilting yesterday. So I'm going to relocate everything around that start point of that last row, because I can put the needle at the start point where the thread started to the tie-off stitch, and I can simply click on this point, then answer yes when the screen comes up, and let Creative Studio do its work. Now, here we have everything is relocated around the start point of the last row that was quilted. Crosshair says that the needle is sitting on the start point of that row, and I use that to relocate. I'm going to draw a boundary. The boundary is in place, and I'm going to make a small adjustment to the first row to bring that back so that it doesn't quilt off the edge. Just very carefully adjust that. Okay, the pattern's been adjusted in place on this first row. The other rows look like they're going to be okay. Again, I'm going to take this second row that's going to quilt next, and I'm going to draw the marquee box around it. And we'll right click. All the patterns have been selected in that next row. I right click. I'm going to combine this into one group, and then I'm going to right click. Okay, remember I combined all the repeats in this second row to quilt. So if I left click on it, you can see that it is one pattern now. I also right clicked and I reversed the start and end, so this is going to quilt from left to right on this row, right to left on this row. Now I have to go down and do the same thing to the 4th row. All the repeats in the 4th row are selected. I'll right click, combine them into one group. Then again, and it's finished doing that, I'm going to select it. I'll right click, reverse start and end. I have 4 rows. First row quilt left to right, second row right to left, third row left to right, fourth row right to left. Then I'll have to roll the quilt again, because you can see this next row is part of the pattern is outside the boundary. I can't quilt that. I'll continue to quilt, roll, relocate, combine the second row into one group, reverse start and end, combine the fourth row into one group, reverse start and end, and just continue until I get to the end of this quilt. I've quilted the 4 rows. I have rolled the quilt. I have relocated, and I now have the machine sitting at the right edge using the crosshair to make sure that the quilt, the pattern is going to line up where I want it to with the edge of the quilt. I have the needle sitting in a position to show me where the top edge of the next row that I'm going to quilt is located. Now I'm going to select all of the rows that have not been quilted in this pattern, and I'm also going to measure the amount of quilt top that is remaining to be quilted, and then I will adjust the pattern to match the quilt top measurement. All of the unquilted rows have been selected, and in this block you can see that the amount of pattern that has not been quilted is 44.21 inches of pattern. Now I'm going to measure the amount of quilt top remaining and use this bottom wedge to adjust the patterns to match the measured length of the quilt that's remaining unquilted. The amount of unquilted quilt area is right at, or maybe just a little bit less than 44 inches. So I'm going to adjust this to read 44 inches. I've adjusted the pattern, and now it says it's exactly 44 inches of pattern left to be quilted. I will do this again after I quilt the next 4 rows and roll the quilt. I finished quilting the rows. I've rolled the quilt, did a relocate, checked the left edge and the right edge for alignment. I've selected all the unquilted rows. There's 7 unquilted rows. And on the left, we see we have 28.18. I measured the amount of quilt that's remaining to be quilted. The measurement is 27.5. I'm going to adjust the amount of pattern to match the amount of quilt left. I'm going to set this as close to 27.5 as I can get it. That's 27.59. I'm going to leave it at that. I'll quilt 4 more rows, and then I will roll the quilt, relocate, and this time I will draw a boundary showing these last 3 rows, and then I'll adjust the pattern to fit. I'm reaching the end of this project, and I've quilted and rolled, and each time I did that I selected all of the remaining rows of pattern to see how many inches of pattern was unquilted, and I also measured the amount of quilt top remaining, and I always adjusted and matched the length of the number of rows with the length of the remaining quilt. You see I'm down to the last rows, and see I have a very tiny adjustment that I need to make. It's very small, and this is how you should end up at the end of your quilting project. You should not have a situation where you do not have enough pattern, or you have too much pattern at the end. So I'm going to make this very small adjustment to this by using the center bottom wedge, and I'm just going to raise this up just a tiny bit, If it comes down right to the line, that's fine. I have the adjustment completed there, and I'm going to just finish quilting this. On the right side, I'm going to push this pattern back just a small amount. All the adjustments have been made, and I'm just going to quilt these 3 rows. I've already combined all the repeats in the second row, and I have reversed the starting end to end, and what it's going to do, it'll quilt from left to right on this first row, right to left on the second, left to right on the third, and I'll be finished. Quilt is finished. The last row is quilted. All I have to do now is remove the quilt from the machine. So I hope somebody get a little bit of information out of this video. Let me know.